Hey everyone, Gaijin here. So, looks like we're doing this again. So, for those of you that have no idea what in the world this is about, I have a bit of a history with this other YouTuber online named Nobita. He's a dude in Japan that talks about all these different social issues that affect Japan, and I, well, as the channel name does describe, give a bit of a Gaijin perspective when it comes to issues and matters of Japan. And so the funny thing is that we keep running into each other. There was a time where he asked me to respond and react to a couple of his videos. There have been times where he's wanted to interview me for a couple of videos, which I'm sure a lot of you have seen. Whether or not you watch his content or just watch over on my social media when I call it out. But Nobita just put out a brand new video called Why Americans Shouldn't Come to Japan. And this is hot after one of his other videos a couple months back, talking about why Americans should move to Japan. And I did a reaction to that one as well. So, speaking as an American who has lived in Japan, I wanted to see just how legit these points are. And to be fair, this is not a complete live reaction. I did watch this video once before and I had to compile some notes down. It's just, the thing is that originally when I wanted to put this up, nobody had taken this video down. I asked him about it, and apparently there were corrections that he wanted to make within the video. So technically, I think this video is unlisted, but he gave me the okay to go ahead and make a react to this anyway. And I will absolutely be echoing his corrections that he both has in the comment section of this video, as well as, I suppose, what he'll put in the re-release of this video. Because it's still good content. I'm looking at the like-dislike ratio right now, and it's actually really not bad. So, let's not waste any time. I want to see this. I'm pretty sure you want to see this too. Let's see why Nobita thinks that it is not good for Americans to move to Japan. Okay, so let's pull this up. 1, 2, 3, and boom.
Don't get me wrong, it's not because I just hate Americans or anything like that. And then, why I say this? Before I tell you that, let me introduce myself for those who are new to my channel. Hi, I'm Nobita. I was born and raised in Chiba, which is in Kanto area and really close to Tokyo. And as you can see, this guy is extremely cringy and probably the most awkward guy in Japan.
Do you find me attractive?
You?
Do you find me attractive?
Nobita, how old is this video?
Sorry, awkward.
No.
How could you say that? How about you?
Nah.
No?
Let's move it along, buddy!
So this guy seems just stupid. Why should you listen to him? But because of my previous work and the US military in my town, I have quite many American friends, not just in Japan, but in the US as well. I would say 60% of my foreign friends happen to be from the US. So going back, why I tell you this? It's not because so many Americans are fat, lazy, loud, too sensitive, and so obnoxious.
Nobita, as an American, I'm here to tell you, yes it is. You hit the nail directly on the head as to why a lot of Americans should come to Japan. It is because to an extent we are fat and loud, obnoxious and whatnot. We'll get into that later, but you're not wrong.
I know those are not true, but based on my experience at least, I have to say that they are not compatible with this country in so many ways, which means they're gonna have a harder time, possibly more than other foreigners, but it's totally not their fault. Imagine you went on a date with a beautiful woman and you enjoyed it a lot. She's kind, caring, funny, and extremely attractive, having all the qualities you look for in a girlfriend. But at the end of the day, she tells you this, and you fall into the friend zone. Honestly, how many times did it happen to you? But does it always mean you suck as a guy? So
speaking as someone who did fall into the friend zone many a time growing up, that's actually not a horrible, terrible thing, because you still got friends. Just want to throw that out there.
It's all your fault. Of course not. Sometimes you are just not compatible with her. So let me say my point again. Americans are just not compatible with Japan in so many ways.
I do have to agree with that.
Not all Americans, and I talked about the advantage for them a few months ago. But to be fair, let me share the possible downside. I want you to take like this. If you move to Japan, you're gonna lose a lot of benefits that you have in the US.
Yes, you
and
are.
It could lower your
Oh my
happiness
God, are
level
you ever?
significantly. Every time I say that, so many weeaboos disagree though. What are you talking about? I must get tons of benefits, right? It must be much more than in the US. But in reality, maybe America has more benefits actually. Anyway, these are the things you should consider before moving to Japan. So under the Japanese law, anyone having multiple nationality has to pick only one before the age of 22, and that
I have to stop right here because this is actually one of the corrections that Nobita was making in the next release of this video and in the comment section. The Japanese law actually does not force you to pick one residency or another. They basically try to get you to give one up. I don't have the specific document name right here, but there is basically a form that you can fill out that will prevent the government from taking away your Japanese citizenry. But what you do by signing that form is say you're going to try to give up your foreign residency. The thing is that you could try until you're dead. So you can technically hold on to your dual citizenship for as long as you want to, so long as you are fulfilling that criteria of filling out that one particular form. I'll put it up here somewhere. I just couldn't remember what it was offhand.
That's why she only has a Japanese passport now and had to give up American one. I know, maybe it's not gonna be an issue for you, but what if you get married in Japan and even have kids? Today, over 900,000 people hold multiple citizenship in this country.
Yeah,
but those people are going to lose the huge benefit soon and have to choose either thoroughly becoming Japanese or foreigner. And once you became a foreigner, the people and the government can treat you completely differently in a negative way.
That's
even if you are
true.
born and raised in Japan. Actually, even if you became a Japanese citizen, would people treat you as a Japanese person?
Nope.
Really? Unless you look Japanese and speak fluent Japanese.
No, they won't.
Maybe most people still see you as a foreigner. Anyway, this might affect you a lot, but nothing you can do about it, unfortunately. So regarding the reason, the Japanese government explains like this, which I kinda get. And
Nobita, I know you kind of get it, I kinda don't. What does this mean? They said people having multiple citizenship could cause friction between nations depending on which country's perspective. What is protection? What is this protection? Like, what is this word? Are we talking about healthcare? Are we talking about national pensions? Are we talking about other government aid? Are we talking about tax responsibilities? Like, that's what I kind of don't understand, just really quick, is that I don't really get what the government actually means when it says this. And I'm not saying that to disagree, I'm saying that because that's not very clear. So for foreigners like me who would be possibly moving to Japan to possibly stay there for a much longer period of time, who may have to deal with this kind of issue, it would be really important to explain what in the heck does this mean? What does the government mean when it says country protection? Clarifying that, I think things would be a lot better.
maybe because we don't allow it, we don't have many conflicts between different ethnicities or race. So for Japan, it could be a big benefit. But I would worry about Americans moving here, because in the US, it's really common, so Japan might be totally different for you. I know, Japan has a...
Okay, so let's go back and talk about a few of those things, because there's only just a handful of bits that I'd be like, well, hang on a second, but the majority of it I agree with. The thing is, Nobita is absolutely correct. The concept of being Japanese is utterly bound in blood. You could have citizenship on paper, you could have completely fluent Japanese comprehension, you could act as Japanese as possible. But if you look anything like this, you're just every single time. I've talked about this in countless videos prior to this. You will never be given the benefit of the doubt whether you actually are a Japanese citizen who just happens to be foreign, or even just someone who understands Japanese normalcy. Unspoken rules, things like that for that matter. So no, he's absolutely right in that. I mean, that's something that I think that the United States kind of takes for granted. It doesn't matter what your ethnicity is here. You could have come from anywhere, and even if you behave different, even if you don't speak the absolute perfect English possible, we still will identify people as being like US citizens. I hesitate to say American because America is an entire continent, including Canada, so I'm gonna try not to use that word as much as possible. And the thing is that Gen 2 or 3 kids from parents who come abroad to come here and live, they'll pick up American behavioralisms, but they're still gonna look like their nationality, but we don't care. We in the United States do not care. If we can get a sort of vibe that you are quote-unquote red-blooded American, then you're gonna be red-blooded American. So again, that's going to be something that people who move to Japan are going to just have to deal with. It doesn't matter where you are. People are just going to think you are a foreigner who probably doesn't know very much. And sometimes it takes very little to prove that you know some, if not a lot. Sometimes it takes a lot of effort to convince people. So yeah, you're just going to have to be careful with that. Okay, so driving license. Let's give this a go. And
a great transportation, but you might actually need a car depending on your area or job. Who knows? Maybe you're gonna end up living in a countryside like this, which is not a bad thing. But no worries, right? If you already have a driving license in your country, you just need switching that to a Japanese one, which would be no big deal. That's actually true if you are from any of these countries. But as you can see,
if you are from anywhere that drives on the left side of the road versus the right side of the road, there are some exceptions to that. It's not hard. So if you live in any of these countries, you're kind of good to go. I don't know if you have to take any other particular tests or not, just for like recognizing it's like a written test. But yeah, you really are ready to go.
The United States is not on the list, which means you have to obtain a driving license from scratch, unless you are from either of these.
Well, first of all, Nobita did say that there were two other, I think it was Ohio and another state where the exceptions do apply. But I do want to say, he told me, and he mentioned in this particular video's comment section, if you have a license already, you don't have to take things like driving classes or lessons, which can take a long time to get done. All you have to do is basically just take the test just as is. Take the written test, take the actual driving portion of the test, and really that's it. So that's going to save you weeks, if not months, worth of extra classes and other crap. When you say from scratch, I kind of get where he's coming from. But again, it's like, it's a little bit of a correction.
Can you imagine how difficult this would be if you don't speak Japanese well or don't have any translator? Trust me, it's already so difficult. Even Japanese people fail many times. Now, maybe that's because we are Asians, right?
That's racist!
Anyway, I feel really sorry for any foreigners who have to go through it. But on a second thought, maybe it's gonna be a great experience and you enjoy it a lot. I guess you can take it positively like that. But this is something many Americans...
Okay, before we get to that, let's talk about this whole driving thing. Now, for those of you who watch a lot of my content, a lot of people have asked me a lot of questions about the JET program. Well, I want to very specifically state now that the likelihood of you living out in the Inaka, out in the countryside, is actually pretty high. The chance of you actually getting into a city, like a really big city to teach, it's there, but it's not as big as you might think it is. So yeah, there is a huge chance that you're gonna be out in the Inaka, out in the countryside, and you will need a car. The nearest train station may be like an hour or two walk from where you live, because things really are that far spread out. And I remember Dogen did a video talking about being in a train station out in the Inaka, and go watch that. And he's absolutely correct. The trains will come maybe once every, like, I don't know, 3-4 hours, something like that. I'm exaggerating, but it really is a lot less frequent than more populated places. But I will agree with Nobita in saying that, yeah, if you live out in the Inaka, it's actually not a bad thing. I lived out in the Inaka. I loved it. If I can move out to Japan again, I want to live out in the Inaka. Granted, I would like to live within some kind of, like, decent time, maybe 10-15 minutes from a train station so I can zip around. But no, it is actually pretty cool. I will say this too, when it comes to the driver's test, I haven't personally taken it, but I actually had a friend very recently, my buddy Matt Papa, who recently got his license in Japan, and he told me that it wasn't an easy ordeal in the slightest. But the thing is that when it comes to standardized testing in Japan, you can always expect any kind of test like this to be so difficult and complicated that veterans are not likely able to pass it. I mean, talk to anyone who's currently taking the N1 or the N2 JLPT, and they'll tell you that even native speakers in Japan who are Japanese can't pass these from time to time, especially when it comes to N1. But the reason why they do that, it's overcompensation to make sure that the tester is just abundantly sure that they can't possibly screw up. And I kind of respect that to a degree, to make sure that everything is safe. And I get it, but at the same time, it's like, the old saying is, to err is human, so, I don't know, it's complicated. And speaking of complicated, let's get back to the video and talk about marijuana. And boom.
Americans feel different about because Japan is way more strict. Just possessing that, you could be in jail for 5 years. If you got caught growing that, it could be 7 years. Even medical use is not allowed yet, not just personal one.
Time out. One correction that needs to be made. Medicinal marijuana actually was legalized in Japan, but only very, very recently. So as far as this mistake goes, Nobita, I think you're fine. Like, if it really was that soon, whatever. And boom.
Even though study after study suggests it's actually safer than smoking or alcohol. Now, I'm not saying we should be totally open about that, but isn't weird? Japan is totally tolerant about drinking, and people do that all the time, even during the pandemic. But so harsh on marijuana or any other illegal
We're talking about that soon.
So if you're from America or Canada, you should be really careful about that in Japan. The same goes to this.
Alright, time out. That's another big taboo to talk about, but here we go. You want to know my advice as an American who's lived in Japan when it comes to weed or literally any illegal substance whatsoever? Do not do it. It is that simple. Just don't. Yes, I also agree that marijuana is safer and probably more healthy than cigarettes, and yeah, probably safer and more healthy than alcohol. Don't do it. I don't care. The reason I don't care is because the government doesn't care. Marijuana in Japan is seen with just as much severity as something like meth or crack cocaine. We put illegal substances in these kind of tiers, like these don't ask, don't tell kind of tiers, like someone who gets pulled over for having a small amount of marijuana may just get warned and then get sent away. But no, in Japan, you're caught with anything, it's bad. And you could probably kiss any opportunity to go back to Japan goodbye if you get off easy. Here's the weird thing too, is that I had to forego a whole lot of my regular medications living abroad because a lot of my decongestions had things like codeine and other chemicals that you can make methamphetamines with. It's illegal. It does not matter. There are ways around possessing things like prescription medication, especially if you are traveling abroad. If you're living abroad, it's probably not gonna happen. But if you're traveling abroad, if you have a doctor's note and jump through a couple of the hoops, you can make that work, but you're still gonna have to explain to the police why you have that, and you're still probably going to be arrested, so just don't do it. It is literally that simple. Japan's policymakers are hard as steel when it comes to illegal substances, and it's not changing anytime soon. Don't do it. If you can't live without weed, don't go to Japan. Plain and simple. Alright, so let's get into another taboo topic, tattoos. And boom.
Yes, it's totally accepted in the most states of the US, but still not allowed in Japan socially, because it reminds us yakuza, which means you could be instantly perceived like a scary, violent,
nice game
or dangerous person. Also, it was used as a punishment back in the days.
That's a video that I need to do.
Means you committed a crime. People assumed like that. And even today, the stigma is still strong. Maybe you can't go to many places where you wanna go because the business owner worries you might scare other customers. I know, Japan seems so discriminatory in terms of that, but as someone who grew up in Japan, I honestly feel scared a little bit every time I see a person with a tattoo because I just can't stop this in my mind, even though I know I should stop that. I know, the yakuza is actually getting less and less common to see nowadays. So why do I feel scared, right? But the stigma still does remain. Maybe it's even getting worse.
すごい厳しいなとは思います。今特に昔はですね、必要な悪って言われてたんですけど、まあこれだけその活動ができなくなってくると必要悪じゃなくなってきた部分がすごく大きいんですよ。ヤクザとつるむことによってもう自分のその生活自体も苦しくなる。要はヤクザじゃない人たちがね。
Anyway, changing the social attitude against tattoos can be extremely difficult for Japan. Maybe it takes more decades. To be fair though, it's more and more accepted, at least among the younger generation.
We'll get
and
to
at
that.
the end of the day, it's not illegal. Of course not. And there are still some places you can go to. So as a tourist, maybe it's not gonna be an issue. But as a resident, I'm not sure about that. Like working for a company or making friends can be extremely difficult. Speaking of which, I know this is not
no. Hold on to that, Nobita. Alright. Nobita, she'll look. I'm talking to you, buddy. And I'm talking to everybody in Japan that still has that sort of hesitation when they see a tattoo on a foreigner. How many foreigners have ever been associated with yakuza? Like, I seriously want to know, how many foreigners have ever... The yakuza almost exclusively stay away from foreigners as much as possible. Unless there's a foreigner that's like trying to cheat them or getting in on their turf or causing problems in their places of business, it doesn't happen. I have to go off on a tangent for a second. So, to you, Nobita, and to anyone in Japan who has that sort of feeling of, well, I still have the stigmatism, I really would say, ask yourself, how many foreigners have ever had any association with yakuza ever? And what's more, how many foreigners have you ever seen that do have tattoos that have a sort of style similar to yakuza? Because the thing is, yakuza have very specific tattoo styles. Granted, their designs are drastically different, giving different meaning to their own lives and what they want to accomplish. But the thing of the matter is that most of the time when you see tattoos on foreigners, it's going to be something like written in English across the back, or it's going to be a single sort of design or something on the arm. And I'm sorry. This is a problem that I have with Japan that I'm like, this needs to stop. And it really is the concept of foreigners having tattoos. Because if it's giving you flashbacks of yakuza, especially considering, like, yakuza are decreasing in terms of their power and their presence, I don't get it. I really don't. And as a foreigner, and let me speak to the Americans, to the US citizens in the audience, that's something you're going to have to deal with. You're going to have to deal with the fact there are a lot of places that you're not going to be able to go. Now, if you don't care about onsens, and you don't care about the beach, and you don't care about going to, like, a water park or anything like that in Japan, then it's probably not going to be that big a problem. If you are even going to go work for a business, if you've got tattoos that are, like, either kind of up on the arm or anything like that, dude, any kind of suit's going to cover that up, so I wouldn't be that worried about it. But again, it's like, I can't help but sit here and think to myself, why is this still a thing, Japan? Why is this still a thing? You know there isn't a single foreigner that is associated with the yakuza. You know that most Americans don't know diddly bip about yakuza. And just because people have tattoos doesn't necessarily going to make them mean or violent. If anything, most people that I know that have tattoos are actually really chill. So, I just gotta say, maybe I'm just speaking out of American ignorance, but I really can't help the fact but think, why? So, as far as how tattoos are seen in Japan, have you guys ever heard of this thing called an itatu? So it basically means painful or cringe tattoos. Very similar into the way that the itasha, which is basically like cars that are covered in waifus or other anime characters. This is a thing. They're also known as otattoos, meaning like otaku and tattoo. And it's really interesting because from what I've heard and seen, based on people I've talked to, as well as articles and newspapers that I've seen, people are becoming really okay with this because no one who has an anime girl tattoo anywhere on their body is likely going to be taken seriously. Because it's like, who's going to join the yakuza and get a tattoo of a waifu on their back when there's so much focus on tradition when it comes to yakuza about things like carp and dragons and hanya and other things. And it's like what Nobita said in this video, is that people who are younger in Japan, I would say folks within their 30s or younger, maybe a little bit older, they see tattoos as just, you know, it's just a form of expression. I know that there are plenty of standard tattoo parlors in Japan that are actually doing a little bit better as of late, because there is... See, this is the one thing I actually disagree with Nobita about, at least a little bit, is that I think that tattoos are becoming a bit more accepting in Japan. Now, I don't live there, so I can only really give so much of a perspective here, but when it comes to my experience and the experience that I hear from my friends, tattoos are slowly starting to get a bit more acceptable. Now, specific tattoos, like little pictures of something on your arms or maybe one little thing on your back, but when it comes to like the full sleeve sort of traditional tattoos, no, those are always going to be looked at as something that's gonna have a negative connotation, so I get that. So anyway, let's have a look at dating. And yeah, I'm gonna have a lot to say about this one. And boom.
Necessary, but you might experience, right? So if you say you are American, maybe people see you positively and you have easier time. But my concern would be that a lot of Japanese women have expectations. He must be handsome, muscular, and extremely attractive like these guys. The same goes to Japanese men towards American women. Many Japanese imagine like these people, just like weeaboos have unrealistic expectations towards Japan.
Okay, alright. Time out. A lot of Japanese girls have expectations. A lot of Japanese guys have expectations. You know what? If that's what they want, if those are the only things that they're prioritizing, you dump them on the superficial curb where they belong. Like, the fact that you're using a weeaboo explanation linking men and women Japan's expectations of American really only proves that how stupid a conceived notion that is. I'm probably gonna say this 100 times in this video. If you date in Japan, you kinda need to treat it like you would be dating anywhere. If you're looking for a girl who is pretty and cute and funny and giggly and you only care about that sort of thing, and the same time of someone in Japan who wants to date a handsome foreigner, a handsome Hollywood-looking foreigner, don't do it. It's just gonna end in misery for everyone involved. Sorry, I had to get off of my chest. Let's just keep going.
Based on anime. Many Japanese do the same, based on the Hollywood movies or celebrities. So when you meet someone through a dating app or something, you might disappoint them a lot. Because you are not like Tom Cruise.
So much of the Hollywood filter when it comes to what Japan sees about the United States. This is why I wanted to do a react video. Let's go. Is filtered through, oh, well, these people are very friendly and charismatic and they look really good, and then when they finally actually see, you know, regular people from the United States, it's like, oh, you're actually like that, and it's frustrating. And I'll just come out and say it, I might be making, not frustrating for them, frustrating for us, ladies and gentlemen who are in America, frustrating for us. Making a mountain out of a molehill here, but one of the things that I'm actually worried about as an American, either moving to Japan or even just visiting Japan, is how people in Japan are going to view me as a foreigner in the case of COVID.
That's what I also worry about. When you say you came...
Alright. So we're moving on to topics here. I have a lot that needs to be said when it comes to this whole dating thing. If you're going on a dating app in Japan and trying to find love in Japan, and again, if somebody says, oh, well, you're disappointing me because you're not exactly how I expected you to look, screw them. Throw them out. If you would not take that level of superficial crap here in the States, don't take it in Japan. Because it's going to end just as poorly as it would here. Listen, this is very simple. Rather than focusing on this idea of dating a Japanese girl, you need to go into dating in Japan as if you were dating a girl or dating a guy. It is just that simple. I mean, would you want to deal with that kind of superficial BS when it comes to your relationship here? Don't expect it there and don't tolerate it there and don't give it there. Don't be the giver or the receiver of that. Listen, I've had experiences similar to this. There was one particular gal, I only hung out with her for one night. It was at a party when I was studying abroad. And yeah, she was a Gaijin hunter. For those of you that don't know the term, that's actually something I borrowed from Nobita, because the term that I use is way less nice, but it's basically girls who only go after foreign guys because they're foreign. Throw them to the curb. Throw them to the curb. They're trying to hook up with you for all the wrong reasons. Now, sure, there are exceptions to that, but no matter which side you're coming at with this, you need to want to be with someone because you want to be with the person. Case in point, there was another girl when I was actually in the JET program. I'll call her Mika. Mika was someone who I really did gravitate towards, and it was a very slow process, a very genuine process. She was someone that I actually did want to ask out, but then it turned out that on the night that I was going to ask her out, nothing for like crazy or anything like that, just to like go see a movie and just kind of see how chemistry meshes out or anything. Turns out she had like 5 or 6 guys confess their love for her, and I'm like, man, she doesn't need that out of me, and nothing happened. And it's fine. It's like, I kind of friend-zoned myself in that circumstance, but man, you better be happy you got a Japanese friend in Japan, because as I've said before in previous videos, that's a bit of a rarity. Just look for someone because you like who they are. And if either you're looking at things superficially or they're looking at things superficially, walk away. So, anyway, let's talk about this whole American reputation thing, because I think I'll have a lot to say about this too. And go.
I'm from America. How would Japanese feel? You guessed it. You might face a lot of discrimination in Japan. Just like hate crime against Asians is on the rise in the US. Because people have a fear about getting the virus from Asians. The same goes to the people in Japan. They might worry a lot. Americans will spread the virus in Japan.
Ain't that ironic?
Because we do see news like this. Now, I said earlier, Japan had a positive
I hate news outlets. If there's anyone in Japan who is listening to this, or if anyone has been able to translate what I'm saying, please don't listen to news outlets. It is such a small percentile of who the people actually are.
Image on the US because of the Hollywood movies. But I have to take it back because nowadays it's getting worse and worse. Again, we constantly see news like that, so how could we have any positive impression? To be fair, it's not just Japan, but many other countries have a negative impression on the US. Actually,
we got rid of Trump a while ago. Let's focus on that change, shall we?
Any foreigners coming to Japan, probably people are not so welcome. But I would say, especially Americans, they might be the last foreigners Japanese want in the same country now. Okay, let's forget about the virus. Even aside from that, communicating with...
Okay, so... this is gonna be one of the moments where I'm gonna have to a hard disagree, and not because of anything that, you know, I've experienced, because I haven't been back to Japan in a couple years, but this idea that Americans are gonna spread the virus in Japan, I've talked to a lot of Japanese friends in Japan. I've had friends in Japan coming to the United States in order to possibly try to get vaccines because they got family here or something like that. From everything I said, this is very untrue. And if there's anything, it's that folks in Japan are actually more pissed off at other people in Japan who are still getting together in places like izakayas. Or I remember there was a time, I'll try and put it up here if I can, there was a time where there was this big limited sale for this kind of like clothing brand or something like that, and people were shoulder to shoulder in masks last year before we had any sort of preventative measures. And that's who they're angry at. Now, is that to say that there's gonna be no one in Japan who's gonna be like, oh, well, you're an American, you're probably just gonna bring the disease in our country? No, it's absolutely possible, but it's also extremely unlikely that those people weren't already kind of racist to begin with. They're just looking for an excuse to outlet their racism even more because there's racist people no matter where it is that you go. And I mean, when it comes to that, if you're taking precautions of like wearing a mask and socially distancing, and someone in Japan comes running up to you being like, you're a foreigner, you're gonna bring a horrible plague upon our country. When it comes into the context of Japan, who is shattering wa and who is trying to get along with everyone else? It'll blow back against them, trust me. And I mean, it's not just people that I know that are leaving me with this impression that this may not really necessarily be the case, but I remember it was on the news. A bunch of my friends in Japan and other YouTubers and stuff, other content creators, they were talking about this COVID-19 prevention sheet that was issued in Ibaraki when it came to working in agriculture. And there were all these different points about what you should and should not do with foreigners. Quote, there are many new coronavirus patients who are suspected of being infected by foreigners. I want to see some hard evidence on that, Chief, because if they haven't left Japan in over, you know, since 2020, there's no physical way that that can happen. This one's really good. Don't eat with foreigners, and also don't talk with foreigners unless masked. And it's like, wow, can you be any more racist? Meanwhile, in Japan, there are folks that are irresponsibly going out to crowded izakayas or shopping streets being shoulder to shoulder with people, just having masks, and it's like, come on, man. But I will say that there is a happy ending to this story, because the Ibaraki Prefectural Infectious Disease Control Division stated that soon after the document was released, that the content of the document was, quote, inappropriate. I'm doing this a lot today, I'm sorry, there's just a lot of quotations going on. Stating, I had no intention of discriminating against foreigners, but I am sorry if there were any misleading expressions. And I'm sitting here thinking, how could you not? You are literally saying don't do X with foreigners because foreigners are diseased. Whether you meant to say that or not, that is the message you're getting out, and you have to be more thoughtful about things like that. And I gotta give props to this lawyer, Shohei Sugita, when he said, it is in light of the principle of equality under the law of Article 14 of the Constitution that the administration clearly states that this may promote discrimination of foreigners. That's what I'm talking about. It's like, yeah, there are going to be more people now who are going to be afraid of being around foreigners, but it's by no means, at least from what I've experienced and heard, it's not going to be the majority. Look, I'll just say this. If you're vaccinated and you can prove that you're vaccinated and you wear a mask while you're in Japan and you try to socially distance, no one's going to give you a guff over it, because people are going to see that you are trying to look out for the general population. You're not being selfish, whereas the person who is possibly going to be yelling at you about being a foreigner, despite the fact that you're doing everything you can to protect yourself and others, they're the ones that are going to be looked down upon in Japanese society, because they're the ones chattering wa. Okay, let's keep this going. This is very, very long. And boom.
People can be too difficult. Now, I'm not talking about language barrier. It doesn't matter you speak Japanese or not, because people don't speak clearly or directly, and you have to read their mind. Don't worry, I'm not saying you need to fly in the sky or freeze time like this. I know any humans can't do that, but you just need a mind reader.
Sorry, my nose is
thinking in
itchy.
Japanese.
Okay, joking aside, you need a lot of guessing, which we call 空気を読む. Reading the air. That doesn't exist in the US because many people have different backgrounds, ethnicities, or thoughts. So you have to say that out with words. It's only possible in Japan or country that is homogeneous and collective as a society. America is opposite. It's diverse and individualistic.
When you go to Japan, you're gonna have to learn how to kukyoyomu. You're gonna have to learn how to mind read people a little bit, because no one is gonna come straight out unless you're like drunk or you're hanging out with your boys, and it's gonna take you a while before you actually develop friendships to the point of being the boys. That's actually very problematic for Americans. That's very problematic for people coming in from the United States, is because we wear our thoughts and emotions on our sleeve.
So when we want to say no, we often say, あ、それはちょっと. That literally means, well, that's a bit. And this actually means clearly no in most cases. And people assume you are easily able to get that. As we say, 1を知って10を知る. Here 1, no 10. So my grandma said this when I was younger, when it comes to communicating with people in Japan, which I totally agree. It's heavily based on context and subtle gesture. That can be a big issue, especially if you work with Japanese people, because you can't get what they really want. The only way you can get this ability is having a lot of interactions with natives, watching Japanese TV shows, or observing their tendency on a daily basis. And then you are finally able to get this ability. But I would say the biggest difficulty in Japan would be this. Now some people say Japan is...
Oh, we're gonna get to that. No, thankfully I have very little to say about this point. He hit the nail directly on the head. But there are a couple of things that I want to point out. I mean, I think it goes without saying that if you're going to work in another country, you're just going to have some degree of language comprehension, depending on the type of work that you're doing. But as far as learning concepts like kukyoyomu, which is really difficult for folks like us, as Americans, when we really do wear our emotions kind of out there on our sleeves, and we always are just kind of putting our opinion out there, we're not really hiding it. The thing is that if you study Japanese, especially if you study Japanese institutionally, you will develop that skill over time, because as you learn how the language works, you'll actually understand all these different little intricate challenges when it comes to kukyoyomu. You'll understand the context of it. When you start to understand that there are like 5 or 6 different ways of saying I or you based upon the context of who you're talking to, you'll understand it a little bit more. And it's like Nobita said, if you just spend a little bit of time with folks who are Japanese, or process some of their media, or just things like that, you'll understand it. It sounds daunting and it sounds hard, but it's actually not that bad. Now this is gonna get real interesting. And Boom.
conservative, but it's more like risk adverse and afraid of changing ourselves or something that already exists. Now that can be a positive thing, of course, but when I think about the United States, the culture tells you the opposite. So the people are generally much more spontaneous, adventurous, and risk takers, like starting a business. So of course, when they move to Japan, they're gonna feel restricted a lot.
Japan Inc. is extremely slow to change how they communicate or do business in general. I cannot tell you how many meetings I've been in where I can see they clearly agree with our proposal to help them communicate with international style, but they don't want to be the ones to decide a new style of communication or even to work with a new company instead of the same Japanese advertising agency that they've worked with for the last 50 years, even though they know that the results they're getting are terrible. This means often business decisions are being made not based on merit, but on existing relationships. The fact that startups in Japan are essentially non-existent is another example of this, because it is still preferred to become a corporate soldier, called a salaryman, at a massive Japanese company like Honda, Mitsubishi, or Panasonic, instead of taking the risk of starting your own business or working out a startup. Because everyone views startups negatively or as too risky.
When it comes to social issues in Japan, these have been issues for many years, sometimes even decades, but still have to remain. I'm not saying nothing has been improving, but usually it's really slow because many people or businesses have a strong resistance to change. I know Japan surely has many great traditions and culture. I do not want them to change, but it doesn't mean we can't change anything forever and take no risk. It would be great if the people are a little bit more flexible and open to new idea or change, so the country can get better and better.
Japanese people can't accept change, but I think I can understand why, because living here for 6 years has made me realize, wow, being in Japan is so comfortable. Like, I don't want to go anywhere else. If I have the opportunity to travel around, I don't mind just traveling around Japan. I am already contented because everything is just so comfortable. That's why I guess that's one big reason why a lot of Japanese people don't like change, because they're so comfortable with what they have now.
Now at this point, you already know why I say this, right?
Okay, we're hitting the wrap up. Like, God, where do I even begin with this? If you are a United States citizen, and especially if you're business-minded, and you go to Japan to work in Japan, this is going to be the biggest frustration you are ever going to have to deal with. I mean that. And I don't mean this necessarily when it comes to a human-to-human interaction, because I've actually seen people really make changes when it comes to meeting new people. I mean, that was kind of my whole point of being in the JET program, was to introduce myself, my culture, the idea of foreigners living in Japan, and my neighbors being okay with that and understanding that, hey, foreigners aren't scary. I'm talking about really from a business-to-business interaction, because I can't stand this. Businesses in Japan, too many businesses in Japan, not all, but too many businesses in Japan, they're the only kinds of businesses that I've seen in this world where they could be actively failing and would rather be actively failing and hemorrhaging money and hemorrhaging business versus trying to take some kind of asserted risk and change things up to try and get from the red to the black. I don't understand this. Like, I get that Japan is comfortable, but dude, Japan is stagnating. Anyone who knows anything about Japan's sociology or economy can tell you it is stagnating. And the really scary thing is Japan doesn't really have that much time left to stagnate before they're gonna have a really, really, really big problem. Now, I'm not saying that social normacies when it comes to personal life in Japan are bad. I think there are a lot of things such as politeness, thinking of others before yourself, and attention to detail are things that I think, honestly, we in the US could learn. Those are things that I would not change in Japan. Those are comfortable daily things that I would not change in Japan. And that's kind of what I understood from that gal. She was talking about people in Japan are being comfortable, but I think it's a comfort that has more to do with personal life than work life. Because I'm sorry, everything that I've seen when it comes to Japanese YouTubers talking about Japanese social issues, everybody recognizes that business is a problem. It's just the willful ignorance of problems when it comes to Japanese business that bothers me so much. To simply say that's how it's always been and always should be, anyone who runs any sort of business, big or small, will tell you that that is fiscal suicide. And I'm sorry, Japan, do you want evidence of that? Look, the Ushinawareta Junen has turned into the Ushinawareta Sanjunen. It is no longer the lost decade. It is now the lost 30 years. That is literally from someone's birth into adulthood that things have been stagnating. And it just drives me crazy because the people of Japan know better. The people know that something has to change. But the people who are in charge of making decisions, people in positions of power and government, are not doing anything about it. And it drives me nuts. God, and you know that big problem that I just mentioned before? Japan has like 50 more years or so before their elderly are going to essentially outpace newborns. And I think at this point in time right now, the death rate in Japan has actually succeeded the birth rate. So it's just kind of doing this right here. The population's shrinking. And if it keeps shrinking, there's not going to be enough people to just basically take care of the elderly. And elderly in Japan heavily depend on their families to take care of them. But it's going to become such a burden, it's going to send the economy spiraling into the ground. One of the most crushing experiences that I had in Japan is when I was trying to talk to people about this. Not complete strangers, but friends. I'd be like, what do you think the government should do? What should be done to fix this aging population problem? To fix the stagnation of Japanese business? Every single time, the answer was, it's too difficult of a question to answer. And it's like, who's gonna answer it then? Look, I need to stress that it is absolutely, as a foreigner, none of my business what Japan decides to do with its economy, its people, whatever. They have autonomy of their own selves and their own country. And anyone in the US, I would say, you don't have the right to tell them what to do at all either. But what absolutely kills me is that I'm watching Japan being this risk adverse, and all these people and companies who are willfully losing. They're losing for the sake of keeping up the status quo. And it scares me. It scares me because that's not the future that I would want to see for Japan. As I've said, what Japan decides to do isn't any of my business, but for anyone who's been touched positively by Japan, either by its culture, its media, its people, it's sad. It's like you're watching something you love kind of fall apart, or like you're seeing it possibly falling apart down the line and there's just nothing you can do about it. And that scares us. We as Americans, when stuff doesn't work, we desperately want to change it to make it work. That is our nature and our culture. If something doesn't work, we get rid of it and we replace it with something that does work. But that's just not how Japan does things. And you're gonna have to deal with it. You're gonna have to deal with the fact that there are a multitude of rules that don't make any sense. You're gonna have to deal with dumb bureaucratic processes that don't make any sense and feel like an entire just waste of time. And you're gonna have to deal with the fact that you'll never be able to change anything or do anything about it. And that really is going to be the hardest thing of all. As an American going to Japan, bar none, you have no control to make things change. You're just gonna have to accept it. Maybe you can change things on a really small level to make things better, but when it comes to the really big things that need to change, you're just not gonna get to have a say. And if you can deal with that, you can deal with being in Japan. But if you can't, you just kinda can't. Let's see what Nobita's got for us in this wrap-up. And go.
It's not because Americans are bad and ruin your country or anything like that. But as you know, Japan is opposite to the US culturally and socially, so they just don't match. Of course, that's not always a bad thing. It actually makes Japan interesting. So I always tell my American friends this. You got to visit Japan after the virus was over, of course, but don't move to Japan. You see, take Japan only as a tourist country. Don't even think about moving here. That's my biggest advice. But let me clarify, despite of all the things I said, it does not mean you can't move to Japan and it's definitely a bad idea for everyone. Of course not. There are definitely some Americans who are totally happy in this country, as well as Americans who are not. So at the end of the day, it totally depends on the individual.
So, I guess the closing thing that I would want to say, and to echo Nobita a little bit, I think one of the reasons why we as folks from the United States, can't speak for Canada, I think the reason why so many of us end up falling in love with Japan is because it is so different. Because Japan really is a polar opposite of the United States in a lot of ways. I 100% agree with Nobita on that one, but I think at the same time, it's because we learn so many things about just life, whether it be theological, whether it be everyday, how to look, how to act, things like that. It fascinates me. It fascinates me on a very personal level, specifically because it is so different. I take that perspective and I'll be able to apply that to my own life. And I grow as an individual because of it. There is so much that Japan has taught me that has changed me as an individual. And I know that sounds horribly weeabooish, but I mean, you could say that like anyone who's lived in another country whose culture is different from the US will probably tell you the same thing. Getting that alternate perspective on life and all of its different little intricacies and adopting some of those and coming home with them, they make you grow as a person. So if you're the type of person here in the United States who would look at another culture and see the possibilities of integrating parts of that culture into your own life and growing as an individual, that's something that I think that should encourage you about possibly moving to Japan. Know as much as you can. Know as much as you can about culture and social interactions and language and things like that when going to Japan. But I would never ever say don't ever go to Japan. Just be honest with yourself about whether or not you could integrate in this society. It's not that easy. You become someone different to a degree. You change a lot about who you are. Talked about that in a past video, but anyway, that's all I can really say. Just learn what you can, and if it's something that you can deal with, something you can stomach, and better yet, something that you can learn to enjoy and integrate in your own life, you'll be okay. So anyway, thank you guys so much for watching this. I've been recording for over an hour. If you've made it all the way here, bless you, you're amazing, and thank you so much for being here. Be sure to check out the other videos that I put up. Be sure to subscribe if you want to check out more, because man, I still gotta talk to you guys about the legitimacy, the historical legitimacies of cat girls. It exists, and I can't wait to get to it, as well as talking about the before and after and future of Moe, and man, that really is a lot to talk about too. So anyway, until next time everyone, this is Gaijin, signing out.